Well, we're just been giving everybody a few minutes to get their Monday rolling. Let's see, we have someone else joining us. And yes, Phil, you did send out the reminder emails.
I've sent out several reminders over the last week and a half.
All right. Well, we've got an hour. Looks like we're gonna have a small group, but at least we'll go ahead and get rolling. So welcome, everyone. This is the Johnston Economic Development Stakeholder Group for the Johnston Broadband Study. My name is Todd Kilcop, and I have some interest there, commercial interest there in Johnston. So I've been part of JEDCO, and over the years, there's broadband availability has certainly been a topic in Johnston at the JEDCO meetings, and also among their staff. And so I know that we are aware about MetroNet coming into town. There's still a gap that's going to exist, and it's kind of our job as part of this study to talk about the gaps. So that's kind of the overview. Curtis Dean is on the phone, or is on the call too. Curtis and I collaborate on a lot of these projects, and the study is actually being led by HR Green. And so I'll let Ken Demlow maybe do a little introduction of himself, and then others on the call can introduce themselves.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, we appreciate everybody's time in helping to kind of look at what needs there could be in broadband. And our study is just trying to figure out what those gaps are. And I'm a project manager at HR Green, and appreciate Curtis and Todd working through different aspects of what concerns their broadband concerns they may be. So appreciate it, guys, and I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. Phil and Adam, I don't know if you want to say anything about your roles and organizations.
Adam Pleggy, if everybody can hear me now. I think my microphone wasn't working earlier, but Economic Development Manager for the City of Johnston. Appreciate everybody attending this morning and giving us some feedback from the perspective of developers and multifamily housing property managers.
Phil Dunshee, and I am wearing two hats this morning. One is as Executive Director of the Johnston Economic Development Corporation. That's our mission to promote development in Johnston and create a great business environment, which includes both service to businesses, but also to make this an attractive place to live. So broadband is part of that key infrastructure, and we want to participate to help promote it. The other role I have is I'm a business owner, and my business is located here in Johnston, and I have experienced the challenges of securing affordable broadband, and so I also have a business interest in this as well. Thank you.
Good morning, Dorrance President, Developers of the Group. I have some business interest in Johnston, as well as projects on the Beaver Creek Golf Course, which just got annexed. Thank you.
That's right. Hi, everybody. I'm Curtis Dean, and I'm part of the consultant team that is working on the visioning study. I live over in Grimes. Smart Source Consulting is the name of my business, but it's a business of one, and I work full-time from home, so I am 100% reliant on great internet service, and I'm blessed that the house I live in here in Grimes, I do have fiber to the home from CenturyLink gigabit services, and it's a game changer if you can get it. So really excited to be part of this project, and for my neighbor to the east.
Mark, do you want to introduce yourself? Kind of give a little background.
Yes, I'm Mark Harvey. I'm General Manager of MyFiber. We've been in the Des Moines metro area for about 3 years, and just actually in the last couple months put a cabinet in Johnston and are serving some multi-unit apartments. So yeah, here to listen in and see what your concerns are.
Okay.
Mark, I've had you on my give you a call list for about a month, it seems, and it keeps getting pushed down the list. So this maybe will remind me we were going to talk sometime.
That's good.
Brian, Lexi, does anybody else want to introduce, kind of give some background about the organizations that you work for or with?
Sure. My name's Lexi Nadler. I'm the marketing manager for My Fiber. So I work with Mark. So kind of piggybacking off what he said, we're just always kind of on the lookout to see what's happening in our neighboring cities. So excited to hear what you guys have to say.
Brian?
Morning, Brian Erickson, Knott Properties. We have some portfolio developments in Johnston, as well as a number of third-party listings. Knott Properties is a development company in addition to a brokerage company.
That includes the property that I manage there. So but glad to have you on the call. Then I have Emmanuel.
Yeah, no, good morning. Thank you for having me. A part of the chamber, the Johnston chamber there, and the economic piece.
Okay.
Also just involved with the Metro quite frequently with the McClure Engineering. Just interested to see what the broadband discussion is having. I know we're having that internally. There might be, obviously, there's some interest from our standpoint to do business in that realm, but we are very, very green, and it seems like there's a lot of big push with not only the governor, but Debbie Durham, and really understanding where those funding dollars are going to go, especially part of Leadership Iowa this year. It seems like doing things virtually, people can't really connect really well. So just want to understand how the city of Johnston's approaching it, and then how that can be probably disseminated to other areas throughout Iowa. But thank you for having me, guys. Thank you.
Sure. And the last one I have says Jennings.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yep. Paul Jennings, own a parcel on 86th Street. This development ground, got an invitation to this. So I thought, well, I'll check it out.
Okay. Well, again, we talked a little bit about the study overview about finding gaps in the market. We know that, like, between what's happening in Urbandale and also My Fiber and stuff coming in from Grimes, and then where MetroNet has been supplying some maps. What we're doing is a survey of people to try to frame up the market, see how satisfied they are with their current providers. From a customer base, there's also a business survey where people are encouraged to tell us kind of how their quality is. And we're going to kind of run through those so we get anecdotal evidence, because what we like to do is try to figure out where the gaps are in the information flow that we're getting, particularly as it relates to economic development, because economic development is generally one of the drivers of doing a study like this. One of the outcomes needs to be that we're going to be giving the city more information about the status of its broadband customer base, and also then being able to relay that to the providers to say how likely are people to switch if a new entrant came into town. And so we have the broadband study that is ongoing. Maybe Curtis, you can kind of give a little summary of kind of the status of that here in January.
Yes, the response to the survey has been quite strong. We have a little over 700 people in Johnston have responded to that survey. So we feel pretty confident that that's going to allow us to get a good margin of error when we look at the statistics. One of the things that really stands out when you look at the survey results so far, and this would not be surprising to anybody on the call, is that there is a very high level of dissatisfaction with certain elements of existing provider services, and a high likelihood of people to be willing to take their business elsewhere. We always ask a question on our surveys, and we're doing this in Johnston. If a new company offered fiber-based services, how likely would you be to switch from your current provider? And that's running really high right now. About 73% gave it a 9 or 10 on a 1 to 10 point scale, likelihood that they would switch. So there is a market there that somebody's going to take advantage of, whether it's MetroNet or others. It's quite an opportunity for somebody. It also shows that even in areas where they are considered served according to federal guidelines, they don't feel well served, especially when it comes to price and reliability.
So part of what our goal here today is to get anecdotal information from you, from the economic development community, just in terms of how have you had relationships with your existing providers, whether it be like when you're trying to develop properties or trying to get extensions done. Is there access where you need it and when you need it? What's the quality of that? And then any specific infrastructure that you wanted to relay to the city of Johnston in terms of things that need to be done in the broadband area. So it's generally, we try to just have kind of an open forum, but we can certainly want to focus on your relationship with the existing providers now and what you've heard, or just any information about the gaps. Because I know that, like, as the city has grown, there's been challenges that were at least a year ago or addressed to me, that there was, as the city was growing, that there was significant gaps in just getting somebody to extend. But we kind of need to just see if that continued or what's going on. Any idea, Phil?
Well, I'll start with my personal business experience that I've been in the current office where we're at on Windsor Parkway for a little over 10 years now. And when I first started, I actually started with a T1 circuit. And then that proved to be inadequate. So, and CenturyLink was my provider, and I'm not here to throw them under the bus, but you know, I ended up having to supplement that with a DSL service and paid a lot for it. Had considered a switch over to MediaCom at one point in time, because that was really the only other option that was available. But it was going to cost an individual business owner in my building a significant amount of money just to bring the fiber to our building. And I wasn't willing to make that investment just on my own. As far as I know, they still aren't in our building. For reasons that I'm not totally informed about. CenturyLink did finally bring fiber to our building, and I was able to take advantage of that. I would have to say, you know, we're kind of generally satisfied with the service and the speed that we get for what our business needs are. We did step up our bandwidth quite a bit when that change happened. But it's not cheap. And I'm trying to think of an analogy. You know, if you were a business person, you know, what would you want your cost to be? And obviously, I haven't done the math on this, but boy, I'd sure be a lot happier if I was paying something closer to what my utility bill is versus what I paid a CenturyLink. That would be a great place to be if that were possible. I know that wouldn't necessarily equate in every business, but and then from an economic development perspective, you know, kind of all of the information I have is anecdotal, and generally speaking, if you're not a big player like a John Deere Financial or a Corteva that has resources to do things more on their own and provide for themselves, then my anecdotal update is that business dissatisfaction is very much present. And I think one of the things, as I mentioned, is getting it through a building. Is one of the first hurdles that you have to overcome. So and I do understand from a business point of view, the provider perspective that they're doing a cost benefit. How many people am I going to get to subscribe in order to justify me bringing fiber to the building? And I know even Metronet, when they do their build out, they're going to do the same kind of analysis in terms of just how far they go. So one aspect that I would just suggest be in the toolkit is what can the city do to help cover that gap, to fill in the blank and make things that are not economically feasible with some assistance to make it feasible. So I'll stop there. Thanks, Todd.
Well, I do know a lot of times the issue is the providers are making you as the owner or the person that needs it do all their labor for trying to aggregate their customer load in order to get a project to be feasible. I mean, that's the crux of the problem of, yes, the technology is there. They're prioritizing unlimited budgets in order to do their extensions, but that aggregation point is a pain point. There's no doubt about it. That if you have a multi-tenant building and you're the only one that wants it, and you don't even know your neighbors, and they put it on you, and then when there's an empty slot and nobody can rent it out or nobody's willing to do anything because it doesn't have broadband, then economic development gets stuck in a communication gap. And that's going to be an interesting issue going forward, to make sure that if the city at least now knows where the routes are going to be by the MetroNet filings, or then that you might be able to put together a program by which if people are, if that labor is not being done. Do you know, Curtis, do they have boots on the ground traditionally when they move into a new market like that to actually out and aggregate the sales function?
Metronet, I believe they do. Now, I don't know if it's permanent local staff or if they probably have a crew they move in when a new market is being set up, like they did in Ames last year, that they hustle and then maybe move on. But with them coming into the metro area here, they're going to be probably busy doing Johnston and Urbandale at the same time, and wherever else they're poking around. So I would imagine that sales force will be pretty prevalent for at least the first part of the project while they set up their prospects.
Yeah, it could be worthwhile just to monitor that, Phil, and see if that function is happening in terms of how they're reaching out to the tenant community or to the building owners, is just to make sure that there's not an ongoing gap. From a structure standpoint, we can tell you the Greater Des Moines Partnership is going to do a gap process, and we hope to. One of the goals we hope to be able to accomplish there is maybe to build a tool that could help be an information flow, because for that type of a purpose, because that gap exists everywhere, even out in the rural areas, especially. So where they'll come and MediaCom will say, well, we'll come, but you got to find, talk to 5 of your neighbors and see if you can make it affordable. Do we
Mark?
know? Go ahead.
I was just going to ask Mark if you could share a little bit more about MyFiber and where you guys are at in Johnston, or what your expansion plans, if there are some in Johnston, are.
Sure. We just put the cabinet there. We, really with MetroNet coming in, building fiber to the homes can be a hard business case anyways. And then with competition makes it a little bit tougher. So we had an existing partnership with what we consider a large MDU. So we were able to justify putting a cabinet in there, taking fiber. Now we're here to for business, so we will look to expand as as business flows. Lexi, can you say the exact address of that? Lexi took care of the sales on that.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. It's up on Meadowcrest Drive near the school is where our cabinet is.
You guys, I think some of the conversation here, you guys kind of hit the nail right on the head, whether justify moving in or not. Things considered, at least from a provider standpoint, it's always less expensive for us to build in what we call greenfield areas, new developments, places where we don't have to dig around other utilities. But and then back for market share, what we've seen in our surveys too is just as Curtis said, that 73% would like to move, but it's hard to get them to move, especially in the pandemic time. They like it, but now, well, maybe my standard DSL is just good enough, at least on a rural, not rural, a residential standpoint. Now on the business side, we've seen great uptake, and happy to answer any more specific questions you guys have. At least from a provider's standpoint, we're an open book, and we like to see growth in the area.
I'm Dorrance President. I live in Urbandale, work in Urbandale. I live in the Walnut Ridge Business Park, which is just south of Douglas. The Walnut Ridge Business Park just got fiber. They put it around the Johnston Drive. My land extends to Johnston Drive. It comes down 111th. Bob Brown Chevrolet is on the corner, I-80 and Douglas. I would like to have fiber, really need fiber. My internet, it lags time. I'll get unstable internet quite a bit. I'm using Arion right now. They're better than what I've used in the past. Because I have a lot of trees around me, I don't get the best reception sometimes in the winter. It's not so bad, but I would definitely like to have the internet at my place of work at Developer Silver Group. But I also have 40 acres in Warren County, just outside of Indianola. And they've been running internet down the R57 highway. They're within a mile of my development. I'm getting ready to put in another 40 acres of lots right now. I've talked to Tim Terrell, the underground guy that can put my fiber in. I'll have to probably do some kind of a loop. I've got 40 acres already developed. All of those people want internet or fiber. They have DSL now. It's better than what they did have, but it's costly to put the DSL in, thinking that we're going to have internet with fiber soon. That 1 mile is supposed to be done this year, but we haven't. I haven't heard any dates for sure yet. Can that be privately contracted? Those are my first questions. The second question is, why can't you run them on the, we have the large poles with the electrical running over the top. I'm not talking about the type that you would see just along the country road. These are big metal poles. Can you run the fiber cable up on the top of the wire? Metal poles?
Todd, you want me to answer that?
Yep.
Sure. That's a complicated question, actually. And the answer is, can you go above electric? The answer is absolutely not. You cannot go above electric. If there's room and the pole owners are okay with it, if they allow it, you can go below, but you've got to be like 3 feet below any electric. And the reason for that is anytime you're getting up into the electric space, whether it's above electric space, in electric space, or very close to electric space, that's a whole different set of people who have to do it. And it's a whole different set of safety issues and all that. So there's communication space and then there's electric space. So if there's room under the electric space, and the poles will hold the cables and the pole owners are willing, then yes, you can. But you got to kind of go through all those ifs. But directly to answer your question, you can't be anywhere around the electric. That just doesn't, that is like very, very rare, and no one really allows that. So.
Dorrance, can you talk about Beaver Creek Golf Course? Are you aware of what fiber or internet service they currently have there?
They do not have cable yet. I think they're putting it in. I've seen the orange pipe alongside the road several places. So I'm guessing, because it's a very large project And we've got international global users in the site already, just waiting for sewer and water. We've got people from China that own 40 acres that would like to get started with their development as soon as possible. Those meetings have been going on the last couple of weeks to help them possibly buy some land, additional land from Todd, the owner of the 9 holes at the very top. There's a north 18 and a south 9. The south 9 will be developed into a commercial business park. We'd like to call it a research and development park. I am working with, of course, Adam, who's been very helpful. The 141 Corridor Economic Development Group downtown. And, you know, fiber seems to be easier to get than sewer right now, but I think Adam's working on that. So I would guess that it'll be a pretty high-tech facility location in the next few years coming there.
Rate of return on sewer is really bad.
It gives us something to do with water, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Paul, I
So-
don't know, with, your piece of property in the past off of 86, have any of your conversations historically that you've had with commercial or residential developers included concerns or access for fiber?
Yeah, Adam, this is something that's not been on our radar, so appreciate getting introduced to the need for that, because it's I don't know if it's available on the north side of Windsor Parkway and the Windsor Office Park. I would imagine that there's a lot of demand there, and with the school to the west of us, I imagine there's some definite demand there.
I know from a West Park standpoint, the UPN put a cabinet in on the north side there when that new building was put up, right there, White Oak Lane. So, because Curtis and I work with UPN on some projects now and again, and he told me that they could go as deep into West Park. So I don't know where else UPN is at, but they serve primarily large commercial.
The City Hall is also served by UPN off of Merle Hay Road there.
So how is Town Center going to be served? Do you know?
I think there'll be a variety of service providers. We've had some discussion with Metronet about a public Wi-Fi system that would be available in the town center. But historically, City Hall has also been served by CenturyLink. And then, of course, UPN is there, and I would presume MediaCom is in that direct vicinity as well.
And CenturyLink is serving fiber direct. I mean, you've not had issues with them just saying they supplied DSL.
When we used CenturyLink, I believe that predated me, or I was just coming into the City Hall, but I believe we had fiber through them, I would presume, based off of the level of service that we would have needed. But I would have to ask Cindy that conversation for maybe tomorrow's
Yeah,
discussion.
Obviously, we'd like to see if MediaCom is willing to serve direct off their fiber to some of your large developments.
See, Patrick is here as well with both. Patrick, do you have any thoughts or historical encounters of trying to get fiber service? I know you guys have pretty high demand, and obviously a lot of folks working from home now as well.
Yeah, we had to bite the bullet. I mean, we were on T1 lines or whatever, and we finally just paid to put the fiber in. Of course, everybody else in the building benefited from it. So, but we were at a turning point. We had to do something, otherwise we were looking to relocate. So.
What type of price tag do you look at for how much that they're asking? I mean,
I don't know for sure what it was. And I think we have redundant fibers in here. We got like a failover, I believe, because everything we do is going back to the cloud predominantly right now, and dealing with the large files and stuff. And we're dealing with some, huge files with our scanning capabilities now. So, but we had to get the reliability back in, and speed. And I'll be honest with you, it seems pretty slow sometimes right now. So, but yeah, so.
Patrick, in the work at home environment right now, have you encountered issues? Any
Yes.
staff that you've got working in Johnston with?
Not, I encountered like Friday morning at our council committee meeting or whatever. I'm better off plugging into my cell phone to run a simple Zoom meeting than going through my Wi-Fi through MediaCom. My wife works for Wells Fargo. She deals with the same thing, and we have another neighbor down the street that works from home also. And we're all on MediaCom. We all have the same issues about the same time of day. And it's just, MetroNet, I think we're the first neighborhood going to be served. We're switching over right away. So we just
What
can't.
neighborhood are you in, Patrick?
We're in Green Meadows North. So, but I'll tell you, when the pandemic started, I was probably pretty pessimistic about, whether our infrastructure was going to be able to hold up. And I'll have to say, it did really, really well early on. I don't understand what changed. Being with an engineering background, something had to change because I can't do a simple Zoom meeting, at 7 a.m. in the morning to connect. So, and that's happened the last two council committee meetings on a Friday at 7 a.m. So, the cost thing, yeah, we got to be reasonable and stuff, but I think the reliability is probably the bigger function. I'm sure everybody's heard. So,
Yeah, it's not only that it's actually on, but it's performing when you need it to perform to do business. I mean, that's one of the messages that I think the pandemic has gotten to policymakers. The economic development is happening, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week now, in terms of people needing to be able to virtually work. And
the other area that I see a big gap in is with the providers is just their technicians. Some of those folks don't have a clue. I mean, I know more about them than about their network or how it functions inside my home. But I actually had to throw a guy out of the house because he was just A, being aggressive, and B, didn't know. He was just making up every possible excuse in the book to get by with why the reliability wasn't there in their service, and it was not making any sense whatsoever. So.
And that gets into our understanding the relationships with the existing providers in terms of, are they being responsive? One question we have, it's obvious that Johnston has not lost major projects because of lack of access, because people, like you said, the companies to your north that you're owning these developments are just, it's greenfield, so you're able to write, and they're big enough, people are writing checks. But do you see on the infill, like where you have redundancy problems, like are you losing any relocations or anything like that because of lack of, even if you have it, that you can't get a redundancy? Maybe that's a question for Phil. I don't know, between Phil and Adam. But I think we'd like getting developers' perspective on that too.
Yes, I'm going to just say that I wish I had more information to share with you on that. From a small business owner's perspective, I think oftentimes it's hard to get to the redundancy question, which everybody should ask. And I think, in some respects, there are some who would say they've been served so poorly, they're afraid to ask for the extra thing that really they should ask for. So I'm not sure the awareness even among small businesses there about, do they have any redundancy or not? Redundancy often is, well, can I get both one provider and the other provider into my building so I could switch if I had to? But within a single provider, I don't think that many people really have any awareness of, do they have it or not?
Okay.
I think the ones that have it are the ones that need it know they have it, or vice versa. The other thing about redundancy is the need is most acute when one or both the providers you have are unreliable. And a highly reliable provider reduces the need for redundancy, except for those businesses where you absolutely cannot afford to have any downtime. So a highly reliable provider is likely to satisfy, a vast majority of business needs without redundancy. But you'll always have those ones who say, no, it's my insurance policy to have two providers come into my property so that I'm always guaranteed service, unless, of course, there's an act of God and they're both down at the same time.
From a city hall perspective, we have not had reliability issues outside of the power going off and losing service due to that. Corteva's got multiple service providers, and I think you'll hear from Shazam, who does potentially have some concerns at the later meeting this morning. So I think they could probably provide you some thoughts on that, just because of the importance there is for them on that reliability factor.
Well, certainly, by and large, while the customer base in terms of residential or highly dissatisfied, Johnston has been, I think, in a favorable position just because of those large businesses that you've been able to have most of the business community needs probably getting addressed, and because of the growth. I mean, just as you said, new developments. So it's not surprising that people are saying that they're reasonable on the business side, but it took a while to get there. That seems to be the theme that I've been hearing.
Hey, Todd, this is Ken.
Sure.
We've had a few people talk about specific parcels or specific neighborhoods or specific areas. If it helps us to be able to have kind of fairly specific identification of different areas and who the provider is and what the if there are concerns, what those concerns are. If Todd or you and or Curtis, I'm actually traveling, so but Todd or Curtis, are you guys recording those about those kind of specific areas or specific neighborhoods or specific buildings? If not, if we could have folks maybe email you and just summarize that so we have a specific as possible list, that would be helpful for our next step. So just wanted to throw that out before we're done, that getting that anecdotal but also kind of detailed will be very helpful.
Right. Well, I specifically took notes about the newly annexed area there up at Beaver Creek, because I can see that will be definitely need to have service to it. And I don't know if that was on MetroNet's radar screen when they drew up their plan or not. So, and I also am pretty sure Mark and his company are across the road to the west, because I believe you guys are serving parts of North Grimes.
Correct, we are, yes.
Okay. We should come to South Grimes, but that's another matter. There's already fiber here. I don't blame you for not wanting to come here.
So that is a nice segue to kind of, it's not just now where there might be underserved, but in terms of like the 5-year plan of annexation or growth, does anybody see any like barriers, knowing that my fiber is coming kind of into that northern part, as well as you've got MetroNet coming, or
I don't know if it's a barrier, but I would say that as a new development, as I think about an area like the Beaver Creek development area, which is the annexation area, we're just on the cusp of once the legal issues can get resolved, the city, putting in the water and sewer infrastructure, and there are going to be right away decisions being made. And, honestly, I would hope that there would be some coordination to put in the telecommunications infrastructure to the extent possible to take advantage of those easements, those same easements. So I would put that on the to-do list somewhere. And I would say that about any newly developing area, whether it's just a housing development or a commercial development area.
Ken, can you talk any about the right-of-way ordinances or things that you're doing on review?
Sure. So I do think we want to make sure that we're coordinating how that infrastructure is going to go in with projects. We did work on the city policy, and that was in the city policy. That was in the part we worked on, but having it in as a here's the plan versus making sure that we're getting that taken care of and doing it to the greatest extent possible. I think that's something that when we have our meeting with the department heads, I think that's something we just should talk through to make sure everybody's on the same page, to make sure there's a mechanism to make that happen. So I think the idea and plan are in place. The question is, have we worked through all the details to make sure we make it happen? And the good news is we have a meeting coming up soon where we can talk through that and see what we can do to make that happen. So the policy's there. Now we just have to make the process, I think.
Okay.
I can tell you for the communities that we work in, the joint utility trench, we've been doing it for, 20 or 25 years off and on. But it seems like in the last several years, it's become more of the focal point of the project, equally as much as obviously what we're trying to solve, of putting in additional conduits, spare conduits, trying to partner as best we can. And to some extent, even footing the bill for some of the conduit, which I don't know is right or not, but some communities are starting to look at that. So.
Well, the nice thing about that is it really lowers the barriers to entry for a provider. It really changes the economics. If there is let's say there is a conduit that is put in during your other underground work that is then available for a provider to use, either for free or for paying to use it, it does provide them, the economics are much more favorable then for them because the ground's already been opened up. All they have to do is run their fiber through it.
Yeah, Curtis,
I'm partial with you. There's two different sides of that, but I'd say at least half of our costs are just putting the fiber in the ground. Mm-hmm. So as long as and we see some cases with cities that just doesn't work there, at least in our view. It doesn't make financial sense for us to use a joint trench. Some are great. So as long as the regulations don't get in the way and become anti-productive, that works very well. And it helps future-proof. I mean, you guys are building beautiful towns with walkways, bicycle paths. Right. We don't want to go back in there. We don't want to tear it up. If we can pull in there and maybe so much not now, we like to think that fiber's future-proof. And I think the fiber, it is pretty much. But the growth that we see, as you guys have talked about, you don't know what's down the line. We may have to go back through those same areas again, even though the residents or the businesses in that area are served. We need to go back to a cabinet or go past there again. So once again, there's a right situation for everything, a right solution for each situation, I should say. But I definitely look at that when you can. And but I would say, look at other cities, what's worked and what hasn't worked, and consult with the utilities, what's worked and what hasn't worked. But that's a good thing.
Mark, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on areas where for my fiber, it has worked or it hasn't worked. We won't have to do that on this call, but I think that would be, if you've got a use case of a community that where you've built that joint trenching worked really well for you, that would be great to know. And obviously the bad stories also are good to know as well.
Sure. Yeah. We definitely need to catch up.
And to Mark's point, there are a lot of factors with that. And, part of it is like Mark, like you said, the regulation, part of it is the dollars. Somebody has to pay for the conduit. It is dramatically cheaper. I mean, one of the greatest costs is just opening up the trench or opening up the ground and that. So, it can save a lot of dollars as long as it's done that way. And as long as, Mark, to your point, as long as the regulations don't make it, like hard to, or the costs don't make it that it's cheaper to do it yourself, because
A couple things, I guess, on the,
math got wonky or something. So yeah, there are pieces that go with them. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, a couple things just on the right of way lists and the easement areas and stuff. And since we got some developers on the call, we're always obviously trying to make them the right size, but as this continues to grow and change, we got to be thinking down the road with those easements and right of way lists and make sure we got corridors that we thought, 165-foot right of way is going to be wide enough. And I can tell you, it's not. And I'm not saying I'm an opponent for big right of ways, but we need to make sure that they're expandable in the future so that it is easy to get into. The other thing then is the placement of major equipment. If we can get those away from the intersections so that if a roadway retrofit does come in the future, we're not dealing with that equipment in the intersections. We've been working with Mid-American Energy here the last couple of years about getting their big cabinets located away from the intersections on the new overhead to underground for electric. And I think the same should apply here. Let's get them back a lot line or a couple lot lines from the intersection so we don't have to deal with them in the future if we got to get into the intersection.
Sounds good. One question I would have for you, Mark, is how do you get involved to know for people to call who might be coming in and developing? How do they even know to call a third party? I mean, it seems it's always just been standard, inside the city. Well, you're gonna have to call the phone company, to get their infrastructure in. But how do you deal with that as a competitive carrier?
Really, we when we first came to the area, we were going to be walkie only, and we, working with developers, we were just asked to go and keep moving because other providers weren't. So that's just building relationships is really just, our parent company's based out of Princeton, Missouri. We're, rural people handshake type deals, and that's we just came in and started meeting people, coming to their offices, and just building relationships. 100% what has led to our growth. So and we got some great developers we work with. Occasionally we got to tell them no. There's just some that don't make sense, but the ones that do, we'll build to it. We try, not to have the developers share the cost. We try to do it nearly 100% ourselves, but once in a while, we just tell them straight up that it's going to cost us X amount to get to that development, and that becomes their decision whether they want to do it or not. But I'd say the mass majority of our growth has been without cost share from the development.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on that as well? So if there's a 100-unit multifamily apartment complex that goes up, you have agreement with the developer to bring in fiber to that complex. Is that typically an exclusive agreement, or do you see a lot of these apartment complexes out there have multiple service providers available to the residents in there?
Usually it's exclusive. I'd say we see some of everything. I guess the last few have been exclusive, but if it's existing area and Mediacom's already got coax in each spot, then of course their residents can call whoever. newer complexes, it seems to be exclusive, whether we get them or not. I think whoever the winner of that service is exclusive in there for quite a while. So you start seeing a little bit of everything. Then, you know, you go into bulk deals or not bulk deals. So, you know, we're all over definitely the new, I'd say if there's a new 100 unit, you know, complex going up, whoever's providing there is going to be exclusive.
Is the cost of having multiple service providers in an apartment complex like that significant? Is there a lot of internal infrastructure within that building that raises that cost, or is the primary cost getting it to that front door of the apartment complex?
I'd say the primary cost getting the front door. Plus, there's, you know, a difference in technologies of once you hit the building. And I don't know, it seems we look at it a lot, but you drive past, you know, maybe 10-year-old units and you see all kinds of wires hanging on the side. I think they've experienced that. They've seen the, you know, what a building looks like after having multiple providers not being pre-wired for it. So there's, you know, wires hanging on the outside. It looks pretty poor. So they, you know, hindsight, they don't want that again. But, you know, we like taking fiber all the way to the individual unit, right to the utility closet in that unit. Other people may want, you know, a category 6 cable from the mechanical room out. So I think once they pick their provider and pre-wire for that, that technology they're a little bit more locked into. I don't see too many of them wiring both ways, and we can work both ways. We have, but we, you know, if we get into a brand new unit, we like wire the way we like that we want to provide service for. So I think that kind of stops the multiple providers just because of technology and how it looks and how they want to keep that building going, the appearance of it.
Is there anything the city should be thinking about to ensure that, you know, as these apartment units go up and as they potentially cycle through different fiber connections over time, to make sure that it is set up for that retrofitting or just for ease of access for fiber providers that would come in after the fact?
Once again, that's a little bit different each spot, but I'd say, you know, I don't know if you can regulate it or not. I don't think it makes sense, but to tell developers, you know, multiple pipes into that building, into their main utility room. You know, we've all seen providers move, technology change. I think another path for another provider in, you know, whenever your exclusive contract ends. So I think, you know, it just saves so much construction on the outside and damage to, you know, or not, I shouldn't say damage, but just working around that building. So I think if, you know, from this call, I think the more conduit you can put on the ground in and out of those buildings is what helps. Even business buildings is, you know, existing ones where you have to pay to have service put in. If you can have multiple pipes put in at that time, it just saves so much on the construction side. Fiber's cheap. Construction's expensive.
I would add to that too, that, and again, something you may address in building codes is not only pathways into the structure if it comes to an MDU, but multiple pathways to the units. So, you know, different builders have different, how they do things differently. But if there is a, you know, a conduit or duct to each unit, then that can be used for whatever technology the provider is going to use, so that Mark's not having to deal with, if he wants fiber to the unit, he's got something he can put that fiber to the unit through, as opposed to dealing with coaxial or Cat 6 or Cat 5 cable.
I'm going to throw in that if we also have to take into consideration the building owner or the developer. You know, construction costs are what they are, and that's a big consideration for them. And at least most of the developers that I know might balk at, you know, overbuilding a conduit infrastructure, even though it may be a good idea for them and their tenants in the long term, but that's not a natural for them because of the added costs. So, you know, as you consider, you know, what kind of financial assistance or other forms of assistance, you know, I think that's one of those things that should be taken into consideration. So, I'm kind of a believer in, helping with that last mile or that last connection to, and getting folks to the buildings. Sort of it's kind of a utility model, only not a full-blown utility.
Right.
It's an infrastructure utility.
Yeah.
And so I guess I would just say, let's not be too quick to just assume that apartment developers or others are going to want to be willing to put in that extra conduit automatically. If that's something that, the city does an ordinance on, or that we want them to do for a long term, then okay, how do we help them make that happen?
I think you could incentivize it for sure. I think you'd also need to take a look at the cost. You may find that the cost to run a small conduit to each unit for telecommunications is not a lot greater than the cost to run coaxial cable or Cat5 to each unit. But I think if it is, and it's a disincentive for a builder to do that, then you could maybe incentivize somehow that they do it, that way, the way you like them to, so that it is future proof.
But if what you say is true, Curtis, then also consider the educational component in terms of informing developers, and
Absolutely.
showing them
Developers
that
and builders. Yep.
that can be done cost effectively. Everybody's busy, and sometimes information can really help as much as cash sometimes.
When back in my days in Spencer, Iowa, when we had a municipal telecom utility, we actually would annually meet with all the builders and developers, and we offered them free materials. So if they're building a new house, we spec'd the facility, the cables that we wanted them to run, and we gave them the cable, so that when that electrician went to do that, there was no additional cost. They just stopped at the utility and picked up a box of Cat6 cable and ran that as part of the project.
Hey, Todd, could I throw in a couple of quick questions?
Sure.
Okay. First off, just going back to something I mentioned before, if developers, particularly if you mentioned a specific neighborhood or specific address, if you could just send Todd an email that has that on it and who your provider is, and what the concern was, that would just help us to be able to document things more specifically. So just a quick email with just this is my neighborhood, or this is my building, or this is whatever, and this is what this is who the provider is, and this is what the issue. If you could do that, that would really help us make sure we get the documentation accurate. One other just quick question for the developers. Sometimes we see, we're talking about the connectivity, and whether the connectivity is reliable, whether it's got the speed you need and all that. Another concern that has come up in other communities, I'm wondering about Johnston. Do you have concerns with, particularly like in new developments, or if you're working on upgrading properties or buildings, whatever? Do you have many problems or have experience with problems of the timing of when providers can get there and when they can run the stuff? Or like if you're putting in a residential development, do the houses have to wait for internet once the owners have moved in, or the tenants in business buildings? So just a timing question there. Have you run into those kinds of timing problems, or have the developers or have the providers typically been there when you needed them and moved stuff when you needed to, or ran stuff? So if you could address that, I'd be just interested how that's working in Johnston.
I don't know. I know UPN, there to get into West Park, that timing seemed to work really well. So, but that was a custom deal where they were invited to get to the table and they weren't that far away. I don't know if anybody else has had to wait. I'm guessing, Adam, the occupancy permits get issued for buildings, and then there's still probably a delay while they get their local services up and running.
Proceed.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding from City Hall is that there was about a 45-day lag between requesting service, because we do have a phone through CenturyLink, to them actually getting in there and installing that service. So yeah, I think, some of the emphasis is just on the developers knowing that there's going to be that lag time and requesting service that far in advance.
I saw Lawrence was trying to make a comment. Lawrence?
I see we're waiting sometimes 6 months before we can get the actual full line into the residents.
Lawrence, I appreciate that. I've heard that in other communities around and just hadn't specifically heard that in Johnston, but 6 months gets problematic, right? I mean, 45 days, if somebody moves in and they have to wait 45 days to have internet, that's a problem. But 6 months can really mess up the next step. So interesting. Anybody else have any other experience with that? Because that sometimes that's not an issue. Other times it's a huge issue. And I just was wondering that about Johnston.
Just curious, has Mid-American been pretty attentive for getting their electric?
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
They're right.
Down here in Warren County, that was the most common developer complaint, was that Mid-American wouldn't get to you.
Oh,
But mainly because of maybe the metro area. So I know we're bumping up on our time here. But Mark, thanks for joining the call. From a provider's perspective, I think that you provide a lot of context for us and things for us to think about. But I'd encourage you to follow the process, because I wouldn't mind just getting, as we get our stuff together in the study, maybe getting some providers' eyes on it, who would look at it and say, yeah, these are going to be gaps or not. Obviously, the city wants everybody to have the best service they can everywhere. But we have to produce all this and then get reaction. But we haven't really talked about that, Ken. But I think it'd be a different perspective as we look at our maps, to say at the backside of this that we're addressing the issue, and even our provider has given us their input on some of it.
Yeah, if to the degree possible, that'd be great.
Yeah, we're happy to be a resource of any kind, whether we're moving into that area or not. We're here. As I said before, many times, building a relationship is key to our business, and just if we need our 2 cents worth, we're always happy to have it. One thing I would go on with what Curtis said earlier, when he was at Spencer about whether they give material or not. With ourselves and with MetroNet coming in, we're different providers than what maybe has been out there in the past. Definitely on the MyFiber side, we're just common sense. But if you're a developer and you have a unique situation, which each one is, truly, we're here to help you solve it and tell you what we can do. Not just to say this is the X amount of dollars to get there and walk away from it. Tell us your pinch points and we'll tell you ours. And we work with them, and that's how we've gained a lot of business. Is just let's work this out, common sense, and it goes there. And I think MetroNet's definitely a competitor of ours, but from the conversations we've had with them, I think they're more common sense than what you may have seen in the past also. So call your providers, work with them, and see what can happen.
All right. Thank you. Phil or Adam, do you have anything else that you'd like us to address on the topic?
I have been chatting with Adam. I would very much like to be able to post information from this meeting, maybe even a copy of the video for the developers who were not able to be here today. And also we'll be encouraging them to respond to the city's business survey, as well as the broadband survey, if that is still available to respond to. So we'll continue to encourage people to provide you with input. So thanks for hosting the meeting today.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks to everybody for attending.
thank you.
All right.
Have a great week, everyone.
Feel free to reach out to us as needed. So thank you.